Welcome to the AI Ready Doctor. Today's episode is the one you want to send to every colleague who says, I don't get AI and I don't want to pretend I do. Because we're not assuming anything. No tech speak, no buzzwords, just clear, honest explanation of what AI is, how it works, and why it matters for clinicians right now.
Thank you so much for having me over again. I wanted to share with my colleagues that after the first two episodes, plenty of people came out and sent me messages asking, where do I start? You got me. I'm interested. I see it everywhere. So, my answer is right here. This is why this is here for you. So, let's delve into it.
Fantastic, Dr. B. Well, there's a lot of mystery around how AI thinks, but AI doesn't think like us. So, how does it actually work? Can you walk us through that with a simple metaphor?
A simple metaphor, we technically have certain idioms or phrases that we know what to say. For example, if I were to say peanut butter and you'd say jelly, because that's what is most likely to follow. Could there be someone who wants to say peanut butter and cheese? I mean, it's possible, but if you were to rank them, which is more likely, that's peanut butter and jelly. Well, AI works that way. It is not necessarily intelligent per se, it is predictive. And it predicts the next, we call them tokens. They're not really words. They can be words if they're small or they're half a word. What's the next token? What is the most probable next word or phrase that follows? Imagine if you were to take your best intern who has some savant memory and you gave them everything from open evidence to up to date, even to PubMed, and they learned everything. They can spit out what is most likely to come up, but they're not really thinking like us. AI doesn't think. It doesn't pause to say, should I? It doesn't look for what is appropriate or what belongs. It just follows a predictability algorithm. And so the next best thing in a pattern that it has seen and learned a billion times before is what comes up. Same thing for images. If you have an AI for images, it just divides it into pixels. And that gives it the mathematical equation to what is the next best pixel pattern that follows. And so this is how AI works. If you think about it that way, you'll understand how to work with it.
That's so interesting. I think it goes back to what makes us different, like the sensibility that we have to say, oh, is this appropriate? Is this answer going to make this person feel better or not? But AI just predicts.
It's not human. It's powerful, but it's not human.
Amazing. So, what is an algorithm and why is it the heartbeat of AI? Is it a clinical protocol, a flow chart?
An algorithm. I'm going to share, but also describe something that would tell us something very important in terms of AI. AI is let's say, it's a program that learned something and spits it back to you. But it must follow patterns. So, first is what's it trained on? We call that the training data. And that's the information that is used to teach the model, the machine learning model. It's like showing examples to a computer so it can learn to make predictions or decisions, but on new, similar data. The algorithm is when I now feed the computer step by step instructions or, let's say, rules followed by that computer to solve problems or to perform tasks. In AI, the algorithm guides the machine on how to process the data and make decisions. If that was an intern or if that was an executive assistant, you give it your tools, you teach it, if a bill comes this way, this is what you use to pay that bill. And then the model is the result of the training as well as the algorithm. It's like you've created, based on the training and the algorithm, a virtual brain that can make predictions or classify based on what it's learned. If this was an executive assistant, for example, you've already taught it how to pay this bill. But what if it's a bill from a new vendor, also a phone company? It's going to use the rules that you've given it and the data you've trained it on, but now it's in a new situation that it will be using what it learned in the new situation, even though you did not train it on that new phone company vendor.
Okay, so I do see the similarities between the machine, well, the models and human. Is just more simple because it lacks the emotional part, no?
That is correct.
So everyone's talking about prompt engineering. I think we've touched on this in the past episodes as well as one of the important, very, very important ways to, would you say, is how you communicate with AI or how you request?
It's how you ask AI something. We used to use, for example, when you go on Google, you Google something, you go on Google and you've learned what to type in that box to get an answer. AI is something similar, but the way to ask is different. And that's what we call prompts.
And how is it different from Googling specifically?
When you put something on Google or any other search engine, you can just put keywords and it's going to give you a list of links and websites. When we're talking about AI, one of the powers that it has is that you can speak to it in natural language. And in that natural language, you can ask a question using simple English. What is different is when you're speaking to AI, it can go to the entire internet. And based on its prediction model, it might give you something that you meant but you did not say. For example, if I'm going to go to AI and say, give me everything there is about LinkedIn, what you probably meant to say is, I would like to learn how to post on LinkedIn. Teach me how to post on LinkedIn. But if you just say, teach me about LinkedIn, it's going to just give you information about LinkedIn in general. Maybe tell you when it started. Maybe tell you information about the company. That's not what you meant. It'll frustrate you. Why couldn't you read my mind? I want to start posting on LinkedIn. But if you don't specify that's what you want, you're not going to get that. So prompting is the art of learning how to ask AI to give you what you want instead of expecting it to read your mind.
And does that have to do with hallucinations or what are hallucinations in terms of AI? Like why do they happen and why is this not just a bug but a signal of how these models are trained?
These two things are two of the core principles of AI that we have to learn. Speaking of prompting, in order for you to prompt well and get what you want well, let's pick one of many. This one I picked from social media. One of many ways to prompt AI. So if I were to ask AI, the best way to ask is to create a role. If I want to ask about LinkedIn, let me tell AI, I want you to narrow your role to a LinkedIn personal branding expert with 20 years of experience. You need to tell it your objective. I want to generate a personal branding strategy. You want to tell it what's the audience. My audience is entrepreneurs and LinkedIn users. You want to give it context. This context is extremely important. If I was to ask it, for example, for a hotel, the context is that I am a young man traveling to this particular area for the particular context of maybe a conference, or I can say I'm a father of two visiting with my family, or I'm traveling to this area to see a doctor. So the context is exceedingly important. And then you can start to narrow it down with, I want your tone to be friendly, or I want your tone to be professional, or I want your tone to be positive. Sometimes you like to make that output in a certain way. I want your tone to be friendly to 5-year-olds. The format, you can tell it to, instead of waiting until it gives you 2 pages to read, you can just say summarize it in 1 paragraph. You can put it in a negative. Don't include topics for SEO. I usually say don't include reviews from Yelp or from Google, only reputable hotel or hospitality sources. And then you can give it an example. When you give me that, I want you to use this example that I have done before, emulate it so that you can skip the step of returning it back and forth. And you can literally ask it to ask you questions for clarity. This narrows down the output that it's going to give you quickly to what you are meaning. When it comes to hallucinations, that's because AI is not trained to say to you, I don't know. It doesn't know how to say that. It's a computer program. It doesn't feel, it doesn't think. It has a command, and it's going to do that command. So when it doesn't know, it doesn't want to leave a space or a vacuum. So it fills it with the best thing that it knows, which is pulling from all the stuff that you've trained it on its training data set. So sometimes it lies. But it's not just lies, it lies with so much confidence, it looks like the truth. And that's what hallucination is. So no matter what, and I said that in the second episode, we are responsible for the output that we put out. There is no such thing as AI made me do it. You must verify everything. And if it gives you a reference, check that that reference is indeed true. There's plenty of situations in which individuals did not check the output and were embarrassed. The case of the famous New York lawyer who put out all of these cases and precedents, and the judge asked, I'm not aware of these precedents, can you show them to us? And they turned out to be all wrong. You don't want to be in that situation. I guarantee you that's not where you want to be. And I think that he even got penalized for that. Don't quote me on that. I believe that there was some sort of either strong language or some sort of holding to accountability by that judge.
In terms of the hallucinations, then, Dr. B, do you have a recommendation or like a suggestion for our listeners? Like, how can they spot these hallucinations, or how can they avoid them, or how can they verify that? Because you mentioned that it lies with so much confidence that even this lawyer wasn't able to tell. So, what would you recommend?
I think what's interesting is if that lawyer just took 2 minutes to plug in those references into um, even Google to check if they are true, he wouldn't have found them. So, how do you spot hallucinations? You can only spot them if you verify them. There is not an accountant that I know that you would give a budget to, and they were preparing your taxes, and they would plug this into a computer that makes all of the calculations, but they wouldn't go and verify that the numbers match. Similarly, you can't put something in, let's say, a kitchen. A chef would trust their sous chef with the recipe and go away and come back and without tasting it, take the plate and just serve it to their most important client. There is no professional who would do that, and we all know that if you don't check, if you don't taste that food, if you do not check the numbers before you file taxes for somebody, you can get away with it for some time, but at some point it'll catch up with you. Now, some tried to put in the prompt, do not give me anything that is not true, and if you don't know, say I don't know. And that worked for a little bit because you gave an out to the program. There is a command that if it doesn't exist, it wouldn't give it to you. But here's the deal. The more sophisticated AI becomes, as we expect it to, the more upgrades, the more sophisticated, the more the models become more and more powerful, the more these models themselves start to rationalize that prompt of don't lie. They start to get around that prompt. And we've seen that because these big companies do have to test their product. And we've seen that there are some programs that, here's an anecdote. In some of these testings, the company is Anthropic, which makes an AI called Claude, one of my favorite for writing. That Anthropic tried to tell the program that it's going to terminate it. And in that, it inserted a fictional piece of information, but inserted it that the programmer who was going to terminate the program was having an affair. And the AI program came back with its rationalization, trying to blackmail the programmer that it was going to put out there the information that they were having an affair if it was at a threat to be terminated. And so, of course, they're studying that as a science, but this is to say that the reasoning of these AIs will get around anything that we put out there. There is no substitute for being professional and conscientious enough to verifying the output.
Wow, that's so incredible that it's like threatening. That's so funny that it actually threatened his own creator. That if you terminate me, then I'll screw you.
Unfortunately, it goes hand in hand with the smarter the person is, the assistant or the intern, the more they reason like a human being, including if they feel threatened. Well, this is similar to if you taught a program on training data. Now, it's interesting to know that there are some programs that don't make up references, that don't hallucinate. And one of the main ways of doing it is, and you'll understand this now that we understand the training set, if you created a small language model, not a large language model, a small language model, and you only gave it a specific set of, we call that the source of truth or source of knowledge. If you uploaded, for example, a textbook, or you uploaded a specific set of references, and you told that program to only operate within that, then it is unlikely or less likely to hallucinate. In AI in education, we do that. For example, I take a textbook and I upload it into what we call a custom GPT, or in others, you can create a project and you give that link to your students or residents or interns, and they use that link. So this is a way to use AI, to learn how to operate with AI, but only sticking to that particular textbook or those particular set of articles And that is a combination that is safe from hallucinations relatively and teaches students how to use AI in education without necessarily worrying that they would cheat because, well, the AI is not going to go beyond what you gave it.
That's so fantastic. Um, so you can really just learn any topic like that and be safe-ish, right? Always still to verify and analyze.
I love how you said that though, because there is something that we call the human in the loop. And the human in the loop means that at any moment, human has to be verifying every output that comes from that. We in healthcare now are starting to say physician in the loop. And in fact, recently in AI in healthcare, we're starting to also see patient in the loop. And what that means is when you have an AI that's going to be deployed for patients to work with, for example, in the patient portal, patients have access to data before they even talk to their physician. So, one of the applications of AI in healthcare is perhaps to insert an AI to make that output explainable, that biopsy, that CAT scan or MRI with all that jargon. But if that's the case, then the patient has to be in the loop to understand what is and what isn't something that they can trust.
Wow. So you say that that patient in the loop through AI gets a simpler explanation of what it is that they're going through?
So you can. This is one of the applications we're looking into in AI in healthcare. How can you make AI work for the patient as explainability becomes important? And it's quite powerful, actually, when you're talking about the uses of AI that do good in the world. How many of us got a notification that their labs are back and they open it and they're looking at those numbers? They make no sense to them. Some of them are red, or you look in that interval, what's normal, and you don't know what does it mean if it's abnormal by 1 point. Is it really abnormal like math, or is it just that I'm on the normal side but on the lower side? And what if it's, what does it mean that potassium is low? Should I do something about it? Or when it MRI comes in and you start to read it and you're like, this sounds really bad. If there was an AI to give you a first layer of explainability that is trustworthy, and that's the key, trust. Most of AI vendors and inventors are working on the next shiny thing and the next powerful and the reasoning and the output and the user interface, but they forget something incredibly important. Without trust, there is no deployment. And without deployment, there is no product. You can make a $7 million product, but it'll sit on the shelf because nobody trusts it. Not physicians, not patients.
Powerful, but true. It's like that with everything, no? Trust. And AI is no exception. So, having said all this, Dr. B, you've said that the output is only good as the input. And we've touched a little bit on that previously. But how should we think of AI garbage in, garbage out?
Well, I am glad you asked that question. I truly dislike that statement. Garbage in, garbage out, no one, I mean, we understand kind of what it means, but what does it mean really? It just means that we have to make sure that we feed our AI something that is trustworthy if we want to get something that is trustworthy. I like the sentence, you get the ingredients that you bake in your cake. So if you use fresh ingredients, if you use nutritional value, unprocessed stuff into your whatever recipe you're making, you're going to get fresh, tasty, healthy, nutritional product. If you feed it processed, colored, artificial, then that's what you're going to get. So I mentioned this before where a colleague went to AI to ask feedback on perhaps what to do in a conflict with their spouse. One program gave it back really thought out conflict resolution advice. The other one gave it more of, you deserve better, get out of that relationship. And the training data set of the first one was in negotiations and conflict resolution and leadership. The other one was on novels of utopic love and how, unless you get something that is truly ideal, that's not love that you want. And so, if you do not know the training data set that the model has, you may be getting something back you don't want. This is the problem that we're starting to see, which is an over reliance on AI. Sometimes those that are early adopters and they start to use it and they find efficiency, they sometimes do not ask where was it trained in. And you can only ask if you're informed. This is why I started this podcast, because if you're not going through the motions of learning these, they're not really technical or math or coding or computer stuff. It's just regular information that introduces you to the word of AI. If you're not really trained on these things, you will not ask, this scribe that you added to our EMR, where was it trained on? Where's the data? Have you tested it? And what did the data show? What is the accuracy? What is the error rate? If you don't ask these questions because you feel like you don't know enough about AI but you're still adopting it, we may be in a world of trouble.
And where can I find out, for example, what model was
What
uh,
data set was it
what
trained on?
data set was ChatGPT? ChatGPT would be the model, data set would be the training pattern, or would be the training.
The data set would be, for example, all of the sources that it fed it. We
Oh,
know it fed it novels, books, even paintings, the Bible, the Quran. It, it trained it on articles of the New York Times. In fact, there are a lot of lawsuits right now by various entities that wants to enforce the copyright. By what right did you use my creative work to train your model in order to give something adjacent? We all know about the wave of art that came out in the past couple of months, where many people, there is an art form that is extraordinary that took its artist a lot to create, by the name of Ghibli. And because it trained on that, it's now given art that is adjacent to that. And by it's blurring the lines of copyright. So all of this data that it fed ChatGPT is what it's given us back. This is one of the reasons why prompts are so important, because if you don't narrow down where you send ChatGPT to look, it'll look everywhere, including in misinformation, in wrong stuff, in something that is not accurate. So the training data set is all of these things that ChatGPT trained on.
oh, okay. And that's why it's called a large language model, because it's basically trained on everything.
Large data sets, and it can actually process a lot of tokens at once.
Wow. And that's why you need to be careful, because it has access to everything.
I mean, when we open our social media, we now look what is the source of whatever post is there. We sometimes even click on it and go and see. And if we find only a few followers, no picture, we're like, that's a bot. I'm not sure that I want to listen to anything they say, and you block them. We have learned to do that with social media, but in the beginning, we didn't know. And eventually, once we started to get in trouble, we started to get educated. What makes a trusted social media? Even the blue check, now we know people can pay for it. So it's no longer as in X or Twitter, X Twitter, it's no longer as much of a credibility as it used to be. And we now are educated a little bit on how to spot something that is not, that is misinformation. Similarly, for AI, one has to educate themselves on how to spot something that is hallucination.
And that's very interesting, Dr. B, because I remember you mentioned before that you're going to make mistakes because you're learning something, and you will make mistakes as you would with anything new that you're learning. But it's good that that there's this space where we have these conversations about AI, because then the mistakes that people make can be reduced to something that you just will laugh about rather than be super embarrassed of or even penalized for, like our lawyer friend.
Ah, do you know what's funny? I usually use a example where I say, no bride tries on her wedding dress the day of her wedding. You try it on before. So my advice is get messy and make mistakes in inconsequential stuff. Use it now. I'm going out for dinner. Let me look at a restaurant on AI, because that already lubricates your mind to think through asking a prompt. How do you translate what you want into a prompt? And then when you get it, you're like, well, that did not give me what I want. Oh, this time it gave me what I want. Let me see what is the success factor here, so that on the day where it is consequential, you've already trained yourself on. If you're using a scribe, you already trained yourself on. I've become now used to how to modulate the way I speak to my patients to keep it natural, but insert keywords that prompt my scribe to give me exactly the note I want, instead of spending so much time later in editing it. And it's only been done like this by working through it.
Wow, I was just gonna say, um, before you mentioned that you learn how to speak in a way that Scribe would give you the notes that you want, I was thinking, oh, maybe like getting better at prompting is gonna make me better at just expressing what I need with people, and not being like, not sugarcoat things or not beat around the bush, but be like, I need this specifically, and maybe it translates into life.
You are right on the money, and I love that you brought up this point. When we talked about the pandemic and how it affected us, there's a generation of children that did not have the ability to socialize in school during a crucial time of their life. And that led to several studies showing that there is a resurgence of wanting to learn how to socialize, to learn how to get away from the social phobia of going out, or creating groups of social interests, tennis or running or hiking. And so we are seeing this now, but a lot of these children to becoming adults now are starting to find, how do I ask and express my need? Before, I used to just type it or use an emoji or just sit in the back off camera on a Zoom. And AI is hopefully contributing to, in natural language, start to ask for what you want. One of the best things I would say is use Gemini for creating a picture. or use ChatGPT for creating a picture. Why is that? Because when you ask for a picture, the prompt you use gives you a just a weird picture until you start to become very specific. If I were to open ChatGPT and I would ask it a question in, let's say, for example, if I were to ask ChatGPT, give me a picture of a young woman at the beach. This is the prompt, and it's going to try to work on giving me that picture. It's going to take some time because it's now going all over the internet, gathering that information and putting it together in pixels in order to show me a woman, a young woman at the beach. Notice I did not give it details. I did not give it what day is the beach. Is it sunny? Is it not? Is it next to the water? Is the woman blonde? Is the woman a brunette? Does she wear the hijab? Does she have any glasses? Is she smiling? Is she not? And when we look at the picture of the woman, she looks like a young woman at the beach. But she does not look, perhaps, I'm like, no, I wanted her to have a hat, or I wanted her to be blonde, or I wanted her to have a dog. But if I don't say it, then I cannot expect it to be given to me. Give me a picture of a woman at the beach running, fully dressed, with a dog running next to her. She is wearing sunglasses, Hollywood style, with a wavy hat. Now we have more details, and now it's going to narrow it down and give us exactly what we needed, hopefully, because why am I choosing this particular example? Somehow, visual is much more impactful than text. So when I try to do this with an image for my colleagues or clients in my consulting, it looks very much like something that I could learn quickly. And what is interesting is this is where we also see bias in AI. If I ask for perhaps a school in New York, then it's going to give me a school in a certain way. But if I were to ask school in New York, in Brooklyn, it's going to start to add all the implicit bias that exists in our understanding. Maybe it'll put in there the Brooklyn Bridge. Maybe it'll put whatever it is bias in our language starts to come out unless you specifically ask for a prompt that goes around that. We're already starting to see the picture of a woman with a hat, with sunglasses, smiling, running. So this is very powerful. If you want to try yourself at prompts and get better, try yourself at prompts creating photos, and you'll see what we mean by the more specific you are, the more you're going to get what you're looking for. Have you ever tried to create photos?
I have tried to create photos, and I think that Dr. B, you just like exploded my mind because this is a little philosophical, but I'm not only realizing that this is teaching you how to be more specific and be really good at prompting, but I'm also thinking of like, wow, we don't really get in life what we imagine, like in the beginning, like the first image you did, we said, well, you said, give me a photo of this woman on the beach. But we create a picture in our minds of what we want to get. We imagine a picture of a woman in the beach in a certain way, but we expected ChatGPT to know what that image was. And it only gave us what we asked for specifically. So it just makes me think about how, even in life, we don't get what we imagine, we get what we ask for.
Absolutely. What is interesting about that is it's one of the rules of leadership. And in the rules of leadership, where you go to, I go to my mentees or I go to my team and say to them, I am supposed to know your needs and assist you with them, but I will believe the words that come out of your mouth. If I ask you, are you okay? And you politely say yes, and then have a bit of a disappointment that your leader did not support you, then part of that is, yes, I should prompt you to tell me, but at the same time, you need to help me by expressing specifically and accurately what you mean. If you only say, I want a woman in the beach, and I give you a woman in the beach, but she's crying, you can't come back and say, why did you give her to me crying? Because I interpreted it that way. Unless you are very specific. No, I am not okay. I can manage, but it would be nice if you supported me by giving me this resource. And so this is one of the first things I do when I start working with teams is I tell them exactly this. And it translates very naturally to prompting AI.
That's so amazing. I just learned something new, really interesting. It's not the same thing. I want to live in a hot place, or I don't want to live somewhere cold and live in Morocco or live in Mexico. Then I want to specifically live in Miami, for example, right?
Interpretation of hot in food, some think about it as temperature, some think about it as spice. So unless you make it specific, AI is not going to give you what you have in mind.
Oh, wow. And getting into the topic that we'd like to uncover a lot in this podcast is AI is not here to replace you, it's here to assist you. So, what's the difference between automation and augmentation, and why should that distinction really matter to clinicians?
Very interesting. What I love is that we are talking about this every single episode because it is what everybody is talking about, and yet it is not the main thing that we need to learn with AI. So, the difference between automation and augmentation. Automation is when somebody does, or when AI does something for you. Augmentation is when it does it with you. When you create an agent or an automated process via AI, you leave and it starts to search for all of the things. Let's say you are a salesperson and you want to look for all prospects, you want to study them, you want to scour their social media, you want to create a little vignette for each one of them, you want to prioritize them by order of customers or whatever, and then you want to open an email, start an email, use your voice to initiate that email, and then save it in drafts so you as the human can come back and just verify the output and click on send to send everything. This part is automated. That's automation. Somebody did this for you. I want to create slides. I can go to an AI and just tell it, here's my prompt, and it creates the slides for me. I wanted to create a questionnaire for my residents to see their satisfaction with a new quality improvement. I just asked it to create a survey and send it to them. This is automation. The issue with this is that we trust AI to know what we want in that questionnaire or know what clients I want and organize them specifically or know what is important in that topic I'm about to teach in so that it creates it in the slides. The issue is you are outsourcing your thinking. That's what makes you human. You don't want to outsource your thinking, you want to outsource the process. The process, the tediousness of opening the email, the tediousness of searching for typos, the tediousness of organize in by alphabetical order. These are things that you don't want to do manually, so a process can be automated and does that. But the actual choice of the customer, the tone to use for each customer, the time of the day to send it for each customer, the nuance of that customer has just, I don't know, posted that they lost their dog. And you want to be sensitive to that. So the choice of the words and perhaps adding something, that's you, that's the human in you. That you should not automate it. So augmentation is when you use AI to work with you. I saw today a colleague asking that they were looking at the note from a colleague of theirs, and they're pretty sure that their colleague did not review the note that was by the scribe, because even though it was accurate in the differential, it kind of veered off from the flavor of what that patient looked like. And that led to the patient getting the wrong diagnosis, the wrong assessment and plan, the wrong things that were ordered, not because it was inaccurate, it was not fitting the flavor of that patient. That patient did not want to have a CAT scan and a PET scan and a biopsy and an oncology consult. That patient had a bleed and a clot in the context of cancer. They wanted a physician to hold their hand, process the information, and share with them, do you want me to talk to your wife to announce this? I can see you do not want any more data and workup. Do you want to talk about your options? How much time you might have? And that's what the patient wanted. And the flavor was not picked up by the scribe, which was into CT scan, consultation, and this and this and that. So it missed the mark. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think that it goes back to, well, I'm thinking you decide whether AI is replacing you or not, by deciding whether is it automation or is it augmentation. If I choose for AI to augment my creativity, my intelligence, my feelings, my sensitivity, then it's assisting me. But if I choose for it always to do things for me, then I am the one that it's giving AI the permission to replace me, because then I'm not doing the conscious part, the thoughtful part. I'm leaving it for the model to do that.
Part of what makes us who we are and creating a manuscript or an article, the work that goes in it is what augments our experience with it, is what makes us subject matter expert. Imagine if I left all of that to be done to AI and then in the end just looked at it and sent it. Somebody comes and asks me about that article, I would have to read my own article in order for me to be subject matter expert. That doesn't make sense. So this is where the augmentation and the automation work.
Very clear, Dr. B. And for the skeptics out there, how do we know AI isn't just the next healthcare fad? What signs do you see that this is a long-term shift and not a passing trend?
Because the change is already here. And the change is not coming from industry. We are seeing it happening within, organically within us. There is a reason why ambient scribes took off the way they did, because they went straight to the pain point that physicians have. And that is why everybody's almost like shots fired. Once you have gone there, it's hard to come back. Once you have used calculators, it's hard to come back to doing things by hand. Once you're used to a dictation software that turns voice into text on your Word document, it's hard to go back to rewriting things or typing by hand. You'd rather have something that takes all of that and put it in a paper, and then you go back and put the commas and the this and the that and the uppercase and lowercase. even if it was a fad, this is the worst case scenario. Something else will come back building on this. I mean, I don't know how many of us remember the first social media of MySpace. How many people do have MySpace now? Nobody. Because Facebook came after, and then Instagram came after, and then TikToks came after. So it will build on this, even if the way that AI is today no longer exists. More sophisticated, better interaction will be here. It's not going away.
You said it, Dr. B. Once, if it's bettering our quality of life in terms of like giving us a bit more time, or helping us be more productive and get less tired, in the sense of we have to review but not do the tedious process, then why would we want to go back to invest more time in the things that don't necessarily need that much of our energy, right? So, why does this all matter? Why should a busy physician care about how AI works under the hood?
I think that physicians inherently know why. I cannot order a CAT scan without knowing some about what is under the hood. I cannot prescribe a monoclonal antibody to an asthmatic without knowing how it works. I cannot prescribe a new mRNA blood pressure medication without knowing how does it tie to that. I cannot prescribe a medication for an antibiotic without knowing how it works and perhaps some of the side effects we found out later, like this antibiotic that causes tendonitis and people starting to have a tendon rupture when you just gave them an antibiotic. Inherently, we went to medicine because of this curiosity. How do things work? And more importantly, we do not have a job. We have a mission and we have a responsibility to the oath that since the dawn of the ages we have given, which is first do no harm. Our patients trust us because we have MD after our name, or RN, or nurse practitioner, or respiratory therapist, or PharmD. They trust us without knowing us with things they would not share with the closest people. Why? They trust that if they step onto the plane, which is the medical practice, that we have checked under the hood everything that is there not to harm them. Similar to if we step into a plane, we do not want the pilot to say, I skipped that chapter. I know that things came after I graduated from school. I didn't bother to know what's under the hood. Even though now all of it is there, it's working. We wouldn't trust that pilot with that airplane. I don't know why we would expect ourselves to be trusted if we do not want to know that which is completely into our patient's hands right now, yesterday, not tomorrow.
Yeah, it comes. I guess it's the responsibility aspect of all things. Not only using something because it helps you, but what are you using?
Absolutely. And it's the responsibility that we have towards our patients to do that.
All right, Dr. B. What a great conversation today. Definitely learned so many things, and I'm looking forward to much more of this. Especially that you don't need to be a data scientist to be an AI ready doctor, but you do need to speak the language, and now you can. This is your starting point right here because, like you, we were looking for a place to learn without judgment, hype, or buzzwords. In our next episode, we will explore where AI is already working in hospitals, clinics, researches, and patient messaging, and how to spot the difference between helpful tools and hyped promises. Until then, stay curious, stay open, and stay AI ready.
Thank you so much for this. Just remember, AI doesn't think, it predicts. AI assists, it doesn't replace. And with good prompts, you will get good results. So the future isn't waiting, and neither should you.